Hello?
Mr. Scott to see you. He has an appointment.
Right. Send him in, please. Go in. Hello. How are you?
Very fit, thank you, sir.
You certainly look it. Put on a bit of weight, too.
Yes, I think I have, sir.
Sit down.
Thank you.
Cigarette?
Thank you, sir.
Well, it's very nice to see you again after all this long time. Must be nearly 6 years.
Little over, sir.
Is it? Anyway, to judge from your letters, the time hasn't been wasted.
Yes, I did get around a bit. And although on a good many occasions the going was pretty tough, especially during the Italian campaign, I wouldn't have missed the experience, not for anything.
I'm sure you wouldn't. When do you expect to be demobbed?
Well, sir, that's really what I came to see you about. I'm hoping to be out by the end of next month. And as far as I'm concerned, the sooner I'm back in harness, the better.
That's fine, because we're going to need you. During the war, as you know, the trading position gradually got worse and worse. In fact, at one time, the situation became really critical. Since then, the tide has turned, but it'll mean a lot of hard work, and I'm looking to you and one or two others to see that the company is put back on its feet again.
You can rely on me, sir.
I know I can. Oh, by the way, I've got a book here that you might like to read. It's all about the company. I think it will interest you.
Thank you very much, sir.
What are you reading, dear?
It's a book about Davenports. I don't think it would interest you.
Why not?
Well, darling, it isn't a love story, and the hero isn't tall, dark, and handsome. In fact, there isn't any hero at all. It's just an ordinary story about a lot of ordinary people.
Come on, darling, don't be mean.
Okay, I'll compromise. You pour me out a drink and I'll read to you.
That's a deal.
Industry was slow to recover from the devastating effects of the First Great World War. So far as we were concerned, it was not until 1920 that there was any marked improvement in trading conditions.
In this year, resulting from the purchase of 2 off-licenses, depots were reopened at Dudley and Wolverhampton. The importance of this move lay in the fact that it provided the only medium for expansion and was therefore essential to future development. In 1922, the company acquired a number of motor lorries, which enabled deliveries from Birmingham and the newly opened depots to be considerably extended. However, we were later to be handicapped by the fact that the rapidly increasing public demand could no longer be supplied. The immense task of expanding the entire brewery had become an urgent necessity. Reconstruction could not be carried out in a straightforward manner, for it was obviously impracticable to close down, even for a short period, any section of the brewery. The existing structure had therefore to be adapted, bearing in mind the necessity of maintaining not only its stability, but also its working efficiency. Of equal importance to the future of the company was the sinking of 2 large wells, for those in use had already become insufficient for brewing purposes. For several months boring continued, and at a depth of 700 feet, water of an exceptional purity was found, and a supply so vital to the brewery was assured. Resulting from the purchase of a large residence adjacent to the CB offices in 1927, a new bottling hall was erected, which upon completion replaced the old-type machinery seen here and provided the trade with an entirely fresh conception of the manner in which bottling machinery should be laid out. Also included in the general plan was an extension of the garage and office block to form the frontage which is in existence today. These buildings were carried out in the same style which characterized the original Bath house. By this time, the construction of loading decks to hold 100,000 cases of beer and the erection of a new wing to the fermenting room had been completed. In addition, extra garage accommodation had been provided to house the rapidly expanding transport fleet on a site which, within the memory of some alive today, was once a cherry orchard and bowling green. By 1929, the bottling stores were working day and night to supply the huge demand, for the sphere of operations had grown to such an extent that the Davenport van became a familiar sight in the counties of Worcester, Leicester, Derby, Nottingham, and the Potteries. In the meanwhile, rebuilding was being pressed forward with all speed. The interior of the CB offices was transformed, new conditioning rooms erected, bottled beer stores became cold stores, loading decks were turned into mess rooms, the refrigerating plant was enlarged and modernized, and an electric power station installed. But in 1931, the unexpected happened. A financial crisis of national importance, followed by a trade slump. The effect upon the company was serious, but nevertheless its policy of constant development to plant and machinery was maintained, and during the following 2 years, unloading decks and storerooms were built, another wing added to the fermenting room, and a new boiler house erected. Without doubt, the brewing trade was one of the last to recover from the Depression, and it was not until 1935 that normal conditions began to exist. In this year, depots were opened serving the counties of Northampton, Bedford, Oxford, Buckingham, and linking up with the London area. In general, construction followed on the same lines as other depots, yet they were by no means stereotyped. In each case, there was a large warehouse for the storage of bottled ales and stouts, and a separate building for wines and spirits. These stores were usually situated to the rear of the loading decks and facing a covered yard which provided excellent garage accommodation. By 1937, 2 more depots had been opened, one in Manchester and the other in Bristol. Nearly 20 years had passed, and we were able to reflect upon the progress made with some measure of satisfaction, for the number of customers trading regularly with the company now exceeded 250,000. Within the brewery, the installation of the latest bottling unit had been completed. In design, the machine employed many new principles and provided a completely fresh conception of the manner in which a highly conditioned beverage such as beer could be transferred from bulk to bottle. Indeed, it was of such interest that brewers from all over the world paid special visits to study the machine in operation.
In May of the following year, our founder, Baron Davenport, died. This great man had many fine and endearing qualities, but that which characterized him most was a desire to perpetuate the ideals for which he'd always striven. He devoted his life to a singleness of purpose, the furtherance of his business, and the prosperity of his employees. And despite many setbacks, which would have discouraged a man of less spirit, succeeded through sheer perseverance and the superhuman energy with which he always abounded. After 17 days, the little world which he had built around him heard with sorrow of his first defeat, mercifully spared the ordeal of a second great world war.
Preparations had been so thorough that it could be said we slipped almost imperceptibly into the new way of life. Our immediate interest lay in making some tangible contribution to the war effort, and with this object in view, a small workshop was quickly organized by reassembling the machinery formerly used for the maintenance of the beer bottling plant and transport fleet. Within a week of its inception, this department, manned entirely by our own staff, was tooled up, and the production of aircraft components had commenced. Although we had yet to experience the real significance of an air raid warning, the evacuation scheme, evolved some 15 months earlier, was rather self-consciously carried out at rehearsals. During the previous year, The transport fleet had travelled well over 175,000 miles, but with the urgent need for conserving supplies of petrol, the trading area had to be reduced. By October, many of our lorries had been commandeered, but we were determined that deliveries should continue, and in sheer desperation purchased broken-down old steamers, some in an unbelievable state of repair. We relied upon the slow but sure methods too. In the spring of 1940, and at a cost of over £15,000, the installation of the latest type bottling unit was completed, the highest capacity machine of its kind in Europe.
Of the war, there was little comment to be made. Things were comparatively quiet, and despite freely circulating rumors of impending battles, we began to think that perhaps, after all, it would end in stalemate. Within a few weeks, however, we were to be rudely awakened. The so-called phony war had become a grim reality. Unchecked, the powerful German offensive swept through to the Channel coast. France capitulated, and the people of Britain realized for the first time that they stood alone.
We, for our part, hurriedly organized an LDV unit and built an armored car. It was a fearful-looking object, which perhaps would have frightened the enemy far less than it did its own crew. Formed and equipped some time prior to the outbreak of hostilities, the NFS prepared for action. In fact, we all became so interested in drilling, shooting, and putting out imaginary fires that it seemed as if business had become a secondary consideration. In September, when the Battle of Britain had reached its height, the company's hotel, the New Inn, Hayes, received a direct hit, a greater portion of the building being destroyed and our first casualty recorded. Built in Tudor style, the New Inn was undoubtedly one of the finest examples of modern public house architecture in existence, being pictured in journals throughout the world. The hotel comprised a complete suite of rooms, including a ballroom assembly hall, where, strangely enough, religious services were often held. That part of the building which had escaped serious damage was repaired and reopened some 6 months later. Throughout the winter, the Blitz continued, and we experienced our fair share. The old malting and corn stores with 40,000 cases of beer were burnt to the ground, and bombs fell on the refrigerating plant and in the brewery yard, dangerously near to the air raid shelter, where nightly some 400 to 500 people sought refuge. Apart from being well positioned, the shelter was fully equipped with auxiliary lighting, air filtration, and a first aid post manned by our own staff. Though there were only 6 in the service, the post remained open day and night. Business and the Blitz did not go well together, but we patched things up as best we could and carried on. By this time, the shortage of staff was beginning to make itself felt.